Good morning, everybody. So today we are going to be presenting on the life and contributions of Patricia Hill Collins and Dorothy E. Smith, beginning with Patricia, who was born May 1st, 1948 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and is currently still alive and well, 73 years old. She was or is an American academic with specialties in race, class, and gender. And Patricia's story is particularly interesting because she is growing up in a time period where people are really advocating and fighting for changes and equality in society for African Americans and for women. So people who look like her ultimately, and her father's a factory worker and a war veteran, and her mother's a secretary. She has no siblings. So essentially, she's kind of having to navigate these experiences rather independently. So she attends public schools in Philadelphia in the 50s and the early 60s. And then she goes to an all girls high school. It's called Philadelphia High School for Girls. And during this time, she's kind of starting to see the racial tensions and kind of experiencing racism and really starting to understand the dynamics between experiences for white Americans versus Black Americans within the educational system. And so these experiences, aligned with her personal life experiences, really heavily influence her interest in sociology. So she completes her undergraduate degree in sociology at Brandeis University, graduating in 1969. And then she completes her master's degree in teaching and social science education at Harvard University in the 70s. And during this time, she's also teaching in community schools in Boston. And then after that, she finds her way back to Brandeis University, completing a PhD in sociology in 1984, during which she is an associate professor at the University of Cincinnati. And then after she graduates in 1984, she decides to become a professor of sociology in the Department of African American Studies for 2 decades until she decides to retire in 2005. A fun fact about Hill Collins is that she's actually the 100th president of the American Sociological Association. In fact, she is the first African American woman to do so.
So the contributions that Patricia to sociology that Patricia did was the book Black Feminist Thought, Knowledge, Consciousness, and the Political of Empowerment in 1990. The focus was more on African American women experience and how their lives intersect because they have a distinctive point of view of being a woman and being a African American. And the book really talks about that, and then at the end it kind of talks about embracing the diverse experiences of these women.
So just to expand a little bit more on the ideas of intersectionality that Patricia Hill Collins really connects herself with, it's a critical theory, but it's also a formulation of standpoint theory, which we will interestingly talk more about when we discuss the contributions of Dorothy. But really what this idea of intersectionality is that identities of race, class, and gender primarily. She does sometimes dabble within sexuality, but all of these identities essentially intersect and they shape the ways that African American women experience life, but especially experience discrimination in our society. And so for her, this idea of Black feminist thought is that it's this perspective and experiences of Black women. And her book actually incorporates like words and poetry and just the experiences of women within our society. But it stems from the fact that originally the thinking is that you can only belong to either Black studies or feminism. And so Patricia basically says that intersectionality is actually about the fact that these two kind of like knowledge groups can come together, but they also can help people understand the inequality that happens in society, especially as it relates to the experiences of African American women. And she also really primarily focuses on money and wealth and how we really see the inequality within classes. And for her, she says that essentially understanding this and talking about this within sociology can help us to influence social change.
Now we have Dorothy E. Smith. She was born on July 6, 1926 in the UK. She was a sociologist who focused on a variety of different disciplines. Dorothy was really interested in mostly women's studies and feminist theory, as well as educational studies. And more specifically within sociology, she focused on the sociology of knowledge, of family, as well as methods. Dorothy had a difficult time finding a job while she was living in England. She was interested in publishing, but decided that that was probably not the route for her. And that is when she started school at the London School of Economics and Political Science, where she received her bachelor's in sociology and social anthropology in 1955. And during this time at LSE, she met her husband, William Reed Smith, where they both graduated and then decided to continue their education. So they attended the University of California, Berkeley, where she received her PhD in sociology in 1963. And during this time, she had two sons. A little bit after that, she got a divorce, and she decided to continue her career being a lecturer at UC Berkeley for 2 years, from 1964 to 66. The following year, she decided to move to Canada to teach at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver, where she helped establish a women's studies program there. And then a year after that, she moved to Ontario, where she worked at the Institute of Studies in Education and developed much of the works that she has produced. And then her last position was at the University of Victoria, where she was a professor, where she focused on her work of institutional ethnography. And a fun fact about Smith is that she actually lived through World War II. So why would this be interesting? Through her work of feminist theory, she got to see a lot of changes in the world, the effects of the war, and how women, the role of women was being changed in society, and how they were being treated as well.
So some of her contributions to sociology is that she expanded sociology and acknowledged a woman's perspective that was very ignored at that time. And so like the quote that we have is, how would sociology look like from a woman's perspective? And she like fought so that people could understand like how a woman might perceive something. She wrote The Conceptual Practices of Power, a Feminist Sociology of Knowledge in 1990, and that book developed the idea of standpoint theory, which is kind of seeing a woman's perspective. And then she's influenced by Karl Marx and feminist theory. She also developed institutional ethnography in 2006, focuses on social relations that structure people's everyday and how interactions are institutionalized and developed.
So these are our references, and that was our presentation on Patricia and Dorothy. Thank you.